It's really easy, isn't it, to kind of, read your Wikipedia page and look at all your achievements and see this amazingly successful lady. Can you help just give listeners and viewers just a bit more context, I guess, and understanding of how you got there and where you've come from? Because I know it's not always been easy.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that phrase, this sort of 20-year overnight success type thing. It's the same when you look at sort of the personal side of, I think, so many founders' lives. And certainly I think as women, you definitely try and keep anything that anyone could hold on to against you back. It's why you don't actually hear a lot about the bad stories of when founders sell their businesses and if they're women, or the way that they've been treated. It's kept very, very quiet. Because again, it's the, I can't have anything tarnish my female representation. I'm one of very few who are in the room anyway. But when I started out, leaving school, I actually got married to my childhood sweetheart, which all seemed very, very logical. As I said, I'd built the story. I knew what I was doing. And actually that ended up not working and divorcing at 23, and I've got a son that's about to be 20. And I'm thinking, my goodness, I was young. And at the same time, I found out I had a brain tumor, which is all fine. But at the time, it wasn't. And, it doesn't have to be operated on. And I live with it. But it was a very dark time. I piled on so much weight. I had hormonal issues. Just everything. And going through a divorce so young, trying to hold down a job, having to maybe lose my home and all these sorts of things. It was really, really dark. I mean, just so dark. I didn't know if I was going to ever make it back out of it. And that's again where I look back and it was business that saved me. And so maybe that's my love affair with business. I mean, it just needs to be a sexier story, but I started building wreaths, right? I was going to, not like death wreaths, like chili and tangerine wreaths, because you need one of those. Actually, you do, by the way. And then I put on an event and a fair to sell my wreaths at, and that then ended up basically becoming a fair business. That ended up becoming not in the high street, like those were the stepping stones. But to get to that point, why I was building that first wreath was because I was at the lowest ebb of my life. I had, I'm all or nothing. I'd given myself in. That was my identity. And now it was just being taken completely away. And who was I? Just even building a business, but you will know the strain that puts on people. And are you going to make it? And how are you a mother when you've missed their first steps and you've missed, do you know what I mean? Every single sports day you have missed, and still today the challenges, and it will and it will continue, won't it? Is the other side to building businesses, to being entrepreneurial, to being positive. It's the light and shade, isn't it, of the journey?
And the one thing I know is 100% true. Is that things are not going to work.
Yeah.
The thing that we don't know is how many things are going to work. And that's literally the game.
Yeah, absolutely.
That is literally the game.
Yeah. And becoming comfortable with the dark times, if you can. I mean, obviously, it's at different levels of dark times. But as you said, knowing that you cannot be happy all the time and that actually happiness is the result of not being happy. So you have to have that balance. But I think, you get that as you're wiser and become older. But going through that time in my my late teens, early 20s, never repeat it again. Let's put it that way.
Do you think that's par for the course of neurodivergence, of people that think differently? Do you think those struggles have to be there?
Potentially, could it be that because you're finding a new path and thus you're more open to not standard ways of doing things, do you feel you can get married at 21? Yes. Do you feel you can start a business with a 3-month-old baby? Yes. So thus you take more risks, maybe. So I hadn't ever thought of it like that. But I've definitely always wanted to do things differently, not for the sake of doing it different.
Not just because.
Yeah, I don't know. It's more I have a vision, or I've already gone into the future of being married young and what that is going to be, or I've gone into the future of what Not in the High Street is, and I've bought the URLs across the globe, even though we can't afford the heating. And you know what I mean? My sister's being paid in white wine on a Friday. You know, it's I've already gone there though.
But I hear it from you, and I hear it from dyslexics, of being able to really brilliantly fast forward the tape. And like you said, you're buying URLs and you can't afford the heating yet. And I'm guessing, and you correct me if I'm wrong, when it comes to like the world of tech, having a brain like yours that can fast forward the tape seems to be a really helpful tool that dyslexics have within their arsenal.
Well, the fast forwarding the tape, the visualization allows me to now paint the picture and storytell. And it helps small businesses join us and be part of us because they feel safe in the knowledge that this is how it's going to be. If you're looking for investors or ambassadors or those sorts of people to help you, advisors, I know the PR it's going to have. I know the spread. I can see the photographer taking the picture of the people who don't even know that they're going to be part of it. You know, the power of our thought, the power of knowing it, believing in it, being it, having that positive mindset, but also dialogue internally. That even though, and when you're, as you know, building a business and it's fast and furious, 99% of it is, if you're on a roller coaster, it's on the down, right? So that's 99%. The power of that dialogue that you have internally. Because you could say all of this on this lovely podcast, right? And I could go to bed and I could go, that sounded pretty good, didn't it? You know, I'd believe it sort of, but not really. And my work now is when those moments happen, because of course they do, is to go, if you don't see it continuously, it might not happen. So I'm working on that, the low moments, the inner sabotage that can happen. I'm working on those things.
And those are, I mean, last Friday, I thought I was king of the world. Everything just worked. And
yeah. You were in the flow.
Oh, it's just in the zone.
Yes, so good.
And still naively when that happens, I forget that it's not always going to be like that, right?
Yeah.
Because then that was Friday, the last working day of the week. And then Monday came, and for whatever reason, it didn't work as a day. And it didn't flow. I wanted to close everything. Mm-hmm. Stop the business, stop the charity, forget the podcast. Enough. Why am I doing this to myself?
Yeah.
And then Tuesday was okay again.
Yeah.
And so this sort of game of snakes and ladders. And I just said to myself that I wanted to close the business, but I didn't take any action towards closing the business.
It's exactly that moment that you're talking about, that we all have, especially building businesses, that I am now, because I used to allow it even to continue for the day. I'm actually now pulling that and saying, a thought is a thought. The more I allow that to take over my day and not take hold of it, the further away I am going to be to the quest. So it's not easy because the day's still shocking, right? Let's just say whatever. Someone's let you down, something's not happened, whatever. But I'm trying to not lose the day even. I'm not even trying to lose the hour.
How do you do that? How are you becoming more efficient, basically?
By actually those two things, a feeling and a thought are not facts. So the day changed. And even if it's a fact, someone's literally just gone, no, Holly. And I'm like, I do not like that word. Thank you very much. Okay, it's a no. There is a reason it's a no. The faster I can move on, I will get back into a zone. I'm training myself to say, okay, you can have it for a moment. Now you've got to get yourself out of it. Okay, the universe shut that door and there was a reason for it. There was a reason for it. Okay. But even if that's an absolute load of bollocks, then that's fine. That's what my brain needs to hear. There was a reason that happened. That's because that wasn't going to work out.
But I think the most important thing you said there is, rather than ignore it or pretend it's not there, you acknowledge it and you feel it and you kind of go, okay, this is a shit time right now.
Oh my gosh. I just already visualize the next 3 years with you in it. What are you talking about? No, right? And so then you have to go, okay, rewind those 3 years. But there will be a reason. And if I look back at the 20 years of business I've been in, every time something hasn't gone correctly, or you've gone against the gut instinct, or you've gone against that sort of, you've tried to force, with a Holly Hurricane, I can force doors open. The door is shut, the door is shut, the door is shut. I force it open. I actually have that ability to do it. I should never force the door open.
Okay.
Every single time I have forced the door open, or every single time I've gone against the gut instinct, or knowing I shouldn't go through that door, I shouldn't do it, I shouldn't hire that person, I shouldn't, ignore the fact that this is going to change the entire culture of this company, but maybe it won't. I have absolutely messed it up. I have paid the hugest of prices. Every single price I have actually experienced and paid because of that. So now I'm like, there will be a reason. There is a better opportunity coming. Somehow you've got to survive to get that new opportunity. And so far since the epiphany, I'm almost using that as a mark in the sand, as an experiment. It has worked. It's an amazing thing.
I'm totally with you. I'm so totally with you in everything that you've just said. And that goes right through to you sitting in that chair, right? I kind of feel like half the battle is being able to get your head up. And I'm such a sponge. I kind of just, I love patterns. So all I have to do is expose myself to enough different sources and I can join dots and make decisions and create stuff. And when it feels great to know that, because then you can harness it.
Absolutely.
And I think part of, a lot of that is around thinking differently. And a lot of that is around curiosity. And a lot of that's around the kind of naivety of like, who am I to kind of go, I'm going to set up a charity and we're going to launch a podcast. And what right do I have to do that? Well, I don't know what right I have, but I'm going to ask, because they can only say no.
They can only say no. Isn't that amazing? It's what you want to say to children. What's the worst that can happen here? No. That's okay, saying no. But you asked. And from asking, what did you just learn? What connection did you just make? You just made another connection of a human being. Do you know the power of meeting the right human beings? Humans that you meet are your tools in your toolkit. And so even if the answer is no, just still maintain that connection. No for now, could be not a no later. You want to tell people, stop being so set in your way, thinking one thing is going to change the world. The mentor's going to have all the answer, everything. You've got to go on your own journey. That's the entire point. To the beginning of our conversation, naivety. If you don't go on your own journey and learn your own lessons, you will not have your own unique experience, which will lead you to the unique brand that you're creating.
Wise words.
I think you always have a bit of imposter syndrome, right? It's ridiculous. But I think what I've always cared more about is actually having a positive impact. So the awards I care most about is where it's around that positive impact. And so I think it's when I get awards where it's like literally, I'm making a difference, is the ones I care about.
Tell me a bit about that positive impact, because I know it is central to what you do and feels like it's in you.
Yeah, I think I've always been one of those people where negativity really bothers me and affects me, and actually affects me mentally. And I see what happens online with social media and how awful it has become and how divisive it's become and how negative it is. And I just hate that. And so, when I wanted to build a social platform, I wanted to create the absolute opposite, a safe space where people could get help and support. And so our algorithm's actually based on positivity and kindness.
Which I love. I mean, I something emotional like kindness and something very unemotional like an algorithm.
Yeah.
How do you do that?
We have a language model. So it basically recognizes language. So for example, whenever you use one of our products, so we have the dots, but we also white label our app to loads of different businesses. Whenever you use one of our products, you can't use awful words. So it screens out awful words automatically from direct messaging, from any posts.
And is that not the norm?
No, it's not the norm at all, because it's not in the interests of social media companies not to have bad behavior, because they're fueled by advertising. They want people to be on their products more frequently. And so actually having divisive, horrible behavior is in their interest. You just have to look at Trump's impact on Twitter, X, and how everyone was addicted to it because of Trump. And so we wanted I'm really lucky that my business model isn't advertising. So I don't have to chase the addictive behavior. My business model is based on licensing my product to businesses who want to build really great communities. So all I really care about is adding value to those communities. And
so smart.
That's what I absolutely love. I'm not sure it's smart. It was more, I just couldn't get up every day if I wasn't doing that. If I was just making another negative, awful space.
But you're just chasing a different thing, aren't you? But it's not chasing a bad, detrimental, negative thing, and that fueling all of decisions and plans and budgets, etc. You're chasing something far more positive, but it sounds like you've been able to couch that in a business model that's also scalable, but in a different way.
Yeah. And I just classic founder, I've tried so many business models, but it was lovely to get to a point where my values and my business model completely align. And that's where the sort of magic happens. And then you just watch the communities and how they help and support each other. And that just makes me happy. It helps me get up out of bed every day.
And so you were, I know, a big sort of drive for your diagnosis was your son's diagnosis. How was that process? How did that feel?
Yeah, I mean, there's so much within that story, Ben. So he's now 10. He'll be 11 in a few weeks. So he's in his final year of primary school. Being an autistic father to an autistic son can be interesting sometimes. when both of your systems collide. And there was one time we were walking in the woods and I was going one way and he didn't want to go that way. So he actually went the other way, got himself lost. I had to go and find him in the woods. And then my wife turned up and was like, what? It was, but he used his abilities to actually navigate back to the car park. So, there's a beauty there, but I realised maybe as an adult I should be slightly less stubborn with that. But no, we have an amazing relationship because we spent a lot of time together. He's got like a range of interests, which is really powerful. But his diagnosis journey, I mean, he didn't speak for the first 18 months of his life. He was clever. He'd just grunt and point, and adults would go and do stuff for him.
Efficient.
When he was 2, he started speaking. By the time he was 2.5, he had the vocabulary of a typical 10-year-old. It was quite amazing because he could converse with adults, which really made adults quite uncomfortable because you've got this toddler who's like stood next to you talking about like politics that he'd overheard. And it was interesting. We took him to our GP, and it was a locum, so she'd never met him before. And me and my wife sat down and talked about some of our thoughts around it. And she was like, you should put him on YouTube, is what the GP said. Because he was just sat there chatting to her like he was an adult and she was an adult. And she actually was like, this is quite, almost, you could see her face like, this is quite entertaining. You should put him on YouTube. We're there to kind of say, look, there's clear difference there. He's
a doctor's not an agent.
Yeah, he's up here. And he's struggling to talk to his peers at playgroup because he's just operating and finds it very, very easy to socialise with adults. So he's standing with the ladies at playgroup and having a good old chat to them instead of playing with the other children. And that was like how it was for a few years. We just got bounced out of the system. So what we actually did is my wife works at a school, and we managed through the school to get an educational psychologist to come and do an assessment so that the NHS might take it seriously. So we had to fund that ourselves. But we got to a point where we realised we were just bouncing off that door. And if we didn't do something to give us that validation from beyond what we think, that actually we might spend years bouncing off, and he might not get the support he needs for things like primary to secondary transition, which is coming in the next year, for example. So we got that report, and obviously through that report, the ed psych does and has an interview with him, gives him some tasks, does bits and pieces with him. And then you have some parental interviews afterwards. Okay. So I sat down with my wife, and the ed psych's asking us questions and, things about ourselves and things about our relationship to Miles. And at the end of that, he's like, kind of said, "Oh, I'll send your reports here, take a week or so, blah, blah." And then says, "Lee, the apple doesn't fall far from the tree." And it's just like, it's that little bit of validation. Because I've always known I was different as well. I've known that by the time I was 3, I could tell the time on an analog clock. You could put that in any place and I'd be able to tell you what the time was. In fact, my birthday cake when I was 3 years old was an analog clock. And I think my parents were incredibly proud of that. But I just had abilities with patterns. I had an ability to join things up. I had the ability to see those interconnections that others didn't. But I struggled with other things like writing. So I suppose the biggest thing is it's a pleasure to have Miles as my son. He's kind of helped me unlock some of my own things. That's not to say it isn't challenging sometimes, but fundamentally, I can sit and talk to him for hours and, the world just floats by, but he's just a joy to be with. And, I kind of felt that part of it, me getting my diagnosis, a little bit was for me, but actually it was so that he could go on the journey with someone else.
And what does Miles know? I mean, he's clearly super bright, as you are. Is he aware he's autistic? Does he know what that means?
Yeah, so he was 7 when he got diagnosed. And me and my wife, had a conversation about, how do we tell him? What do we tell him? How much do we tell him? Because he's 7. What we actually decided is we'll tell him. Because he will read the letters anyway. Because the letters are addressed to us, but they've got his name on. So we talked to him about it, and we kind of framed it to him that, you're autistic. It's a difference. Doesn't mean anything's wrong with you. It means you'll have some things you're really good at. It will also mean there's some things you really struggle at, like putting your underpants on the right way in the morning, because we experience this all the time. So it just helped him to understand and be able to own that difference and actually feel and understand why he does struggle with some things. Like he even identified when I think he was probably 6, and his sister's, 21 months younger. And we were on a park in Lancaster, and she went off and made a friend. And Miles was like, "Why does Annabelle find it so easy to make friends? I find it so hard." And it's just, he's always been aware of those things because he's got heightened perception of things because he's very observant. He watches, picks things up, just like I used to. So him having an understanding is helping him to shape it, him to take ownership of it, not for it to be labelled. And we obviously have to try in that way to kind of explain also that the world has its own opinions on this and that people are on different parts of that journey to understanding what it means, but kind of helping him appreciate that, again, there will be some things that you will struggle with that others might not, but there are some things you will be very, very good at, way beyond what others are.
And so when you kind of look to Miles's future, I hear a really strong undertone of hope.
Mm-hmm.
Crystal ball time, what do the next 20 years look like in terms of society's journey? Where do you think we can get to, need to get to?
Yeah, well, how I think, Ben, is that society is an interesting place. in itself. We're going through significant challenges and changes at the minute. In fact, there's a crisis pretty much everywhere. And crises just follow. Like, there's a reason why permacrisis was like the word of the year in 2021, right? Because there's so much going on. I suppose for me, I think about those young people who are putting out the reality. That's creating quite a tidal wave of change amongst a generation that actually in 20 years' time will be the generation that's sat here like we are today. And they have a heightened awareness, a much wider understanding. They do live in a more polar world, and they do live in a world where the sources they consume are widely ranging and not always the very traditional structured expertise that have existed when we were sat there reading encyclopedias as kids, like, what does this mean? I mean, that presents both challenges and opportunities, because now a lot of information around neurodiversity comes from neurodiverse individuals, which has a power, because so often things have been designed, written and expressed without any input from us whatsoever.
Yes, for us.
Yeah, exactly.
Or at us, maybe.
And the truth is, or the biggest thing for me is, people being able to see that neurodivergent individuals sometimes need a little bit of support, but actually sometimes we can be the ones who support others. And there's real power in being able to showcase that, like, through the work that we do. I'm using some of those skills to actually support organisations, to support in education. And it's not me who needs to be supported all the time. I can actually support others. That's a really powerful distinction from the models of the past. But it's starting to move away from its deep ties with learning disability, because for some neurodivergent individuals, they are and do have a learning disability. It massively impacts their ability to go through a very standardised educational system, right? And we don't have time on this episode, I don't think, to unpack that one. But in the next 20 years, I am hopeful, I am optimistic. There are voices, colour will come to neurodiversity across all different cultures, all different intersections. And I'm in the place where I hope, like by 2040, we'll finally actually see that when we look at neurodiversity across the population, that it's actually everyone. It's not one group of young white boys. It's women, it's men. It's people from all parts of the globe, young and old. It's everyone. And people have neurodiversity in their life, indirectly impacting them. Because truth be told, everyone is connected to someone who's neurodivergent.
Yeah, I mean, especially as 1.6 billion people are meant to be neurodivergent amongst 7-8 billion. That's everybody's connected. Everybody knows someone.